TCU football adds a wide receiver out of the transfer portal over the weekend. Could this be someone to replace the production they lost with the departure of Jordan Hudson? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. You know the drill. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe wherever it is you get podcasts in your audio form. Subscribe on YouTube, please. We're at 575 subscribers, I believe. So we're getting closer to 600, which is a cool milestone to reach. I appreciate your help there. And another week, we're going to hit the gamut here. We're going to do football in segment 1, basketball in segment 2, baseball in segment 3. We're going to start with Dylan Wright, Minnesota wide receiver, originally from Dallas. TCU picked him up in the transfer portal, so that's exciting. And then we'll have some thoughts. TCU basketball added someone over the weekend, so we'll break that down. And TCU baseball did not have a great weekend, and I just need a second to rant on sort of what's going on there. But we start with the news of the Frogs have added their first player from the portal in the second window. We've been talking about a lot of departures like Jordan Hudson, Kyron Chambers, Altrique Barlow. There's a number of guys, right? But they've added someone now, and that's exciting. And so Dylan Wright comes over from Minnesota. Wright last season, 17 catches, 280 yards, and 1 touchdown. His best year for the Golden Gophers was in 2021, 18 catches, 365 yards, and 2 TDs for PJ Flex Club. Before he was in Minnesota, he was actually at Texas A&M. That's where he signed out of high school. And so he's got 2 years of eligibility left. He's a very talented player, but has largely kind of been a depth piece for the majority of his career. He announced on Twitter and Instagram over the weekend that he'd be coming to TCU. And he's from West Mesquite High School, was a 4-star prospect. As I said, was at A&M, then transferred to Minnesota, and finally transferred over now to TCU. Has some really good size, 6'4", 215. So we're talking about a big physical wide receiver. You know, watching some highlights of him over the weekend, he can make contested catches. That was something they like to do with him at Minnesota. And so you add him to the outside wide receiver room, along with Savion Williams, Blake Knoll, Cordell Russell, the exciting true freshman who didn't go through spring practice because of the collarbone injury. Also got Jalen Robinson, the Ole Miss transfer, who also spent some time at UCF. And so some exciting players. I mean, from a production standpoint, he's had very similar production to Jordan Hudson. Obviously, though, we're talking about very different situations. Hudson was a guy that was super young, showed some potential, showed some flashes, and you could see the ability for him to make the jump from year 1 to year 2. But apparently didn't have a great spring, was not really a factor out of spring camp, and he decides to move on for whatever reason that is. Have not heard a landing spot for him yet. But I think this makes sense. I mean, it's not – I don't think it changes the calculus for the season. But this is a guy that you're betting on, okay, he's got talent. He's shown some flashes of success at his stop in Minnesota. Maybe we can unlock something that hasn't been there in the past, and hopefully we can do that this year at TCU and this Kendall Briles offense that they're going to be a part of. But if nothing else, it's quality depth. It's someone that should be able to get a grasp on this offense quickly and won't put you in a bind if you have to put him out there at one of those outside wide receiver positions because of injury or something like that. But I think Dylan Wright will be a factor here. You know, it's not, and he's got multiple years of eligibility. Whether or not he chooses to use that is up to him, but that's a plus as well. So lose one wide receiver, they add Wright. Another player that's getting some buzz, has not committed yet, but TCU has been linked to him, is Colin Deary. He is currently offensive lineman at Maryland, recently entered the transfer portal. 6'3", 275, was part of the 2022 class. Played some in Maryland as a freshman at the center position. Originally from Pennsylvania, that's where he played his high school ball. Was a state champion wrestler in the 275 weight class. So, you see that ability to grapple and use his body well. And so this is exciting because it's a young guy, interior offensive lineman. And the center position has kind of been up for grabs. They had John Lands there for most of spring camp. They also gave Willis Patrick a shot. Ezra Dotson, the transfer from Arizona State, was kind of the presumed guy at that position, but I guess he didn't really just take it and run with it. And so it's still kind of up for grabs. So I don't know if Deary will come in and get a chance to be a center. I'm not sure if he'll step in there and be at that guard role. But again, if nothing else, you're adding to a roster that needs depth at that position, that needs people in that two deep, and having position flex is always a huge plus when it comes to offensive line, because ultimately you're just trying to get the best 5 players on the field at the same time. It doesn't matter so much like what positions are they going to play. It's just about getting the best 5 guys that can protect your quarterback and get some push in the run game. So Deary is supposed to visit TCU this next weekend, and we'll see if he commits. But got a wide receiver. They might go get one more. Looking at an interior offensive lineman, I think there's going to be some defensive linemen that are added in this window, and then I feel like they'll also add a QB as well. So a lot of moving parts here, but that's part of the fun of the transfer portal. You lose guys, but you also gain players, and there's always chances to improve your roster with quality college football players who have experience. We'll keep tabs on that. When we come back, TCU basketball, they land Avery Anderson from Oklahoma State. We'll break that down next. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. Before we do that, though, I do want to talk about FanDuel. FanDuel is where it's at. If you want to start betting on sports, FanDuel is the place to be. There's NBA playoff games going on right now every night. FanDuel is the official betting partner of the NBA. Also, Major League Baseball games happening every night as well. Rangers having a really good start to the season. They start a series with the Reds tonight. Nathan Eovaldi on the mound. There's prop bets. There's money line bets. Just basic bets against the spread. Much more complicated parlays that you can get into if you want to do that. They have an app that's easy to use, easy to navigate. You can go to their website, fanduel.com/lockedon. Take advantage of their no sweat first bet deal. Again, that's fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. Proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So TCU basketball has been active in the transfer portal as well. They've been trying to add a lot of players to this roster, and they landed another player, their 4th player in the portal over the weekend. Avery Anderson, the Oklahoma State guard. He is coming to Fort Worth. Last season, he averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. I remember when he went down with an injury, he broke his hand last year. It was a huge deal. People that followed Oklahoma State seemed to think that he was the best player on this team, really had a good command of the offense as a point guard. And so you had another guard who can handle the ball and can score. Anderson comes over with Trey Tennyson, who transferred in from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and Jameer Nelson Jr., who is transferring in from Delaware. And of course, Jameer averaged 20 points a game at Delaware last year. Tennyson had a really good season for the Islanders, and he shot over 40% from 3. So that's a huge deal. Anderson did not shoot well last season, but was dealing with that broken hand, only 18% from 3. He did have in 2020 and 2021, shot 32% from 3. So that's better. He averaged 12 points a game for a couple seasons, 11 points a game last year. So he's a guy that can score, he can handle the ball, he can pass and command the offense. And so I like what TCU's done. They also added Essam Masifa, the big man from Coastal Carolina, who averaged a double-double, 11 points and 10 boards per game. So that's exciting. He has good size at 6'8", 220, so he'll be paired with Xavier Cork. And they're awaiting decisions. Damian Ball has not officially, made a decision on what his future is. Emmanuel Miller hasn't either. Both those guys are going through the NBA draft process right now, would have the option to come back. And then Chuck O'Bannon, I haven't heard what his plans are moving forward. So I like what they're doing in the portal. And this is kind of the way that roster building is done now in college basketball. I did a podcast last week about TCU football and how they've kind of had a slow start to the 2024 class. And Tommy Fisher, one of our loyal listeners, he reached out and he was like, yeah, I think you're right about the portal. Like, this is the new way teams are building rosters in football, and it's so much easier to go address needs in the portal. And I think he's right. And it's even more pronounced in basketball. And I said this before, but like it's at the point where now if you're not one of those blue blood teams that's recruiting top 50 or top 100 players every single year and bringing in 2 or 3, 4 or 5-star recruits every season from the high school ranks that can play immediately, it makes more sense to look in the portal and find guys at the group of 5 level or power 5 level that have played college basketball, that have experience, that know how to get it done. And so Jamie Dixon and his staff are trying to do that. Now, here's my big question or my concern for this group moving forward. I know people are excited. I like how they've kind of tried to rebuild this roster. However, they're still, in my mind, lacking shooting. Now, maybe Trey Tennyson can be the guy. Maybe he can be the guy that spaces the floor. But last season, we saw a team that, did a lot of things well, super athletic, like to run up and down the floor. But when it came down to it, their downfall was they really struggled to shoot. And ultimately in the Gonzaga game, their downfall too was they just didn't play great defense against an elite offensive team. And so if you're not going to be a suffocating team on defense and you have trouble shooting from the outside, I just think there's a pretty obvious ceiling on what you can do. Now, maybe Tennyson and Avery Anderson can be those guys. And if Chuck O'Bannon comes back, he's just such a streaky shooter. I would love for him to be more consistent from beyond the three-point line. But it just didn't happen last season. They really need another guy, in my opinion, that can stretch the floor. But you've also went out and gotten all these guards, and so now you're kind of full at the guard position. We'll see if they add one more big man. But overall, I like what Jamie Dixon and his staff are doing in the transfer portal, finding guys that can compete right away. And you do have some freshmen in Isaiah Manning and Jace Posey that are super athletic and, hopefully can contribute for you as well. And we'll see, like Micah Peavy, in my mind, is a special player with what he can do defensively. And if he can find a way to be more effective on the offensive side of the floor, then that's a dude who could be like a cornerstone piece because he is so good on the perimeter at individual defending. But if you don't have great shooters, you're losing Mike Miles. Mike Miles was, in a lot of ways, the cure-all for their offensive struggles at times because he could just take the ball and get his own bucket. And I think, Jameer Nelson Jr. is the guy that they're hoping can step into that role and take it and run with it. But that's a big ask because Mike was so good the last couple of seasons at sort of, saving face when things broke down. He could just go make tough shots and get his own shot at a moment's notice. And we'll see if Jameer can do that as he kind of, takes a step up to Big 12 basketball, which, the Big East had a really good tournament. I guess you could argue they're kind of the standard in basketball right now, but I think top to bottom, nobody's messing with the Big 12. Okay, we'll wrap things up here in a second. Unfortunately, I need to rant about TCU baseball because it was a rough weekend in Morgantown. And so we'll do that next on Locked On Horned Frogs. So TCU baseball, a few weeks ago, I thought this squad had turned the corner. It's been an inconsistent year, but they took 2 out of 3 from Oklahoma State. Suddenly they were like a half game back in the Big 12 standings, and things were looking up. And following that, they have promptly lost 2 out of 3 to UNC Wilmington, lost a midweek game to Lamar at home, and then this weekend got swept by West Virginia. The first 2 games were competitive. They lost 5-4 on Friday night. Lost 7-4 on Saturday in a game that they led 4-1 and seemed to have control of before a meltdown by the TCU bullpen. And then they lose 17-7 and got run ruled on Sunday. And they are now 7-8 in the Big 12. I looked this morning. They are 50th in RPI. So if, they were a 3rd seed in the Palo Alto Regional, according to D1 tournament projections last week. 50th in RPI. RPI is kind of the main that the committee would use. It would still keep them in tournament contention at the moment. They actually went into that series a half game back of Texas for the conference lead, and Texas ended up getting swept by Oklahoma. So they did not lose any ground to Texas, but Oklahoma State now has a pretty commanding lead in the conference after sweeping Kansas this weekend. But all that's kind of secondary to what I actually want to talk about, because they're not playing well right now. I'm not sure if they're going to make the postseason. It doesn't look like they're going to win the Big 12. They have a series at home against Texas this weekend, and then series against Baylor and Kansas State to close up Big 12 play. But this program that went to 4 straight College World Series, and when they did that, they were known for elite pitching and great defense and an offense that could get it done when they had to. And then some of those later teams had more power. They had guys in the middle of the lineup like Evan Scow and Lucan Baker that could go yard. And they did hit the ball better. But you still had pitchers like Brian Howard and Jared Jancic that got it done on a nightly basis. Mitchell Traver, who was great in the postseason, right? There were so many guys through those years. Brandon Finnegan, Preston Morrison, Alex Young. The list goes on. Trey Teakle out of the bullpen. Riley Farrell. Dudes that just were fantastic. And then, the Slosh era, you had 2 seasons where you missed the tournament. Things kind of got back on track in 2021 after the COVID-shortened season. They win the Big 12. They end up hosting a regional, their national seed. They get bounced by DBU in the regionals. Next season, Kirk's first year, they win the Big 12. They end up in A&M's regional, and they get to the regional final, but they lose to the Aggies. And so this year there were high hopes. And this weekend, and these guys actually I thought did pretty well. I'm not going at them. But this weekend they started 3 freshmen as their starters. Cole Klecker started on Friday. And then they went to Luis Rodriguez on Saturday, who had a really good start. And Ben Albin on Sunday. And they did that because for a 3rd straight season, this starting pitching staff has completely fallen apart. At the start of the year, it was Ryan Vanderhei, who transferred from Kansas, had a bad ERA coming in from Kansas, but the word was, he was on a terrible team at KU. They had bad defense. He's got electric stuff, and he does have electric stuff. He's got a fastball in the mid-90s. He's got some good breaking. He's got some good breaking balls. He's got some good secondary stuff. But Ryan Vanderhei struggled time and time again, and he is now out of the rotation. Cam Brown has unfortunately just kind of fallen off the face of the earth. He struggled starting games, walking guys, no command, getting hit hard. And then they brought him out of the bullpen on Sunday, and he could not get an out. Steven Stroutberg started the first weekend this year, but they really didn't. They really didn't have like a Sunday starter. He's moved into the bullpen. Cole Klecker's come in and done a nice job. But this is the third straight season where they're trying to hold the starting rotation together with bubble gum and duct tape. Last year, Martin Perez saved the day. He ends up coming in on Saturday and doing a nice job. Riley Cornelio looked like an ace for a while and then had an injury and then wasn't really the same. Austin Crowe was also injured, and that made a huge difference. Year before that, Russ Hodges looked great, or Russell Smith looked great through a lot of the year. Ends up, again, dealing with an injury, wasn't quite the same. Austin Crowe stepped in and did a nice job, and then Johnny Ray completely fell apart. Like at the end of the season, could not get an out, and Chuck Smith stepped in and kind of saved the day. They don't really have a guy that's come in and saved the day. I don't know what their starting rotation is going to look like this weekend against Texas. I think Klecker and Rodriguez will get Friday and Saturday, and those guys did a nice job. The bullpen did a nice job on Friday, but then on Saturday they fell apart. At the plate, they continue to leave guys on base and not capitalize on opportunities and strike out, and it's frustrating. But my biggest concern, Kirk Saarloos, former pitching coach, now the manager, the development of these pitchers is not happening. They are not producing elite arms. They clearly bring in guys with good stuff, but for whatever reason, it's not clicking. And I don't have a great explanation for it. But it's been a while since they had a true ace of the staff that made it through an entire season. I know some of that's due to injuries, but again this year, your top two arms are supposed to be Ryan Vanderhei and Cam Brown, and you're at the middle of the season and they're completely out of the rotation. Like can't pitch on the weekends because they're not getting the job done. And you move them to the bullpen, that's not working either. And so, what's going on? Why can't they develop those types of players anymore? That's a huge question for me. Why is the offense just falling off so much? Why are established guys like Braden Taylor supposed to be a first-round, really good freshman year? Luke Boyers showed a lot of promise last season. Elijah Nunez was a good leadoff hitter last year. All these guys are hitting in the 230s, the 240s. Your best hitter is Cole Fontenelle, who's a transfer from MCC and has had a nice season. What's going on at the development level that these players are suddenly struggling? I don't know the answers to these questions, but, this group has gone from – the program's gone from expecting to host a regional, host a super regional, hopefully in the College World Series, to – can we get through the season and make the tournament? And that's a big concern. And it's only year two. Kirk's got some time to get this figured out. And he can get this figured out this season. I hope they turn it around. But they looked lost this weekend. The effort was bad on Sunday. They got run ruled. Could not get outs. It's brutal right now. And it's not the standard that's been set in the past by TCU baseball. So they play DBU tomorrow, and then they'll get Texas this weekend. But I don't have a lot of hope right now. It just feels like you're kind of running out whoever in the rotation these days, hoping that they can stop the bleeding. And again, I like these freshman arms, and they've gotten a lot of experience this year. But it's just not working. And so we'll see. They got an opportunity. The good thing is the Big 12 is a mess, and they still have a chance to finish strong here and hopefully give themselves an opportunity to make the tournament, maybe be a 2 seed, go somewhere where, they can get an opportunity to get out of it. But it's going to be a tall ask because they have lost 5 games in a row now. And they do not look like a team that's ready to play in the postseason. We'll be back tomorrow. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.